One of the questions that we get asked a lot when working in Smartsheet is whether Control Center is actually worth it or not. So, the concept behind Control Centers is an easier way to make a project management solution. So, there's been many customers who just create a project on their own and start to duplicate it, and they're curious, is Control Center actually worth it? Does it help them scale, and how does it actually do that? So, I'm not going to go into all the details onto exactly why Control Center is useful and how it works and what its limitations are, but at least I can explain at a high level when it would be necessary to get it and when it would be necessary to really at least review its value. So as you can see in this diagram here, I have a project template. And the idea behind that is that you could have a dashboard and a project plan and maybe also a RAID log all created in there. And the idea is that you're linking those together. So maybe I have a kind of a project plan in here. And then I usually like to show it like this as a dashboard. And I could have many different items all integrated together in here. But the issue that I would find is as I would start to duplicate it, I really wouldn't have the best way to report on it. So you could use reports and you could use the summary function reports to start to see that information. But what you'll find is that it won't connect everything you need to, and you wouldn't be able to do all the types of calculations that you would really want to do if you're looking at a portfolio of projects. So Control Center helps not only integrate those pieces via cell links in a way that a user would have to go through a very repetitious and tedious process to do, but it also is good at forcing a discipline upon the user to set up a project structure that's going to be able to handle intaking and also handle a summary to look at projects in a way that you're using Smartsheet to its best advantage when it comes to project management. So the basic pieces to Control Center are that it always has an intake. The intake is where you would put a project in, so it could be queued by somebody, it could be a review of potential products or whatever type of project-like review you want to do. You could have it in here, and then sometimes you would need extra items to support it. So you'd need maybe a project plan for it, or maybe at least a budget for that item. And that's where Control Center would come in. Because what you would do is you would say, hey, I approve this project, and Control Center would create all the assets for you. Now you would say, oh, well, you could just save as new and create those assets as well. But what Control Center can do is it's able to rename those, and it's also able to cell link. So, create a cell link from all of that row into the project. So let's say that you have items you want to assign to the developer, the assigned developer for that project. You could automatically put them in the intake, and it would automatically assign them inside the project. It automatically show who your developer is on the contact list and so forth. So there's quite a lot of ways you could preload your project with information. So it's starting, at already 30 miles an hour if you're trying to get to 60. But then when you're working on all this stuff and as you're actually updating it, you want to be able to report on what actually happened in the project. And that information would go to a summary. The idea of the summary is that it's collecting all that detail that you would want to say, okay, how much is the budget? What's the health of this? What were the final results on any status I had inside the project? And you would be able to collect that data in one sheet where it was a row here. It could be all over the project in here. It could be taking up an entire sheet for that information. But it cell links back out to another row. And then what we set up is we set up a portfolio dashboard up here. So portfolio dashboard is looking at all those projects. And it is able to see a new project come in, projects in the intake, see how they're doing, and also have links so that you can navigate from this all the way into here automatically. So it takes a minute to set this up initially when you're working with Control Center. But once you do, you're able to have this structure that keeps everyone disciplined and keeps all the projects consistently named, consistently set up. Whereas what we've seen with customers that don't leverage Control Center, they just start to make this. They could even make a manual version of all these things. Everything that I've shown, you could make a manual version, and you could take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to replicate this type of process on your own. but you wouldn't be able to change it after. Not easily. You'd have to go through and update every single sheet if you needed to make a major change. You also would have to, kind of force the discipline of keeping things consistent over time. So if someone adds a new column in, did they actually reconcile that with the previous projects? Is that going to be backwards compatible, and so forth? Global updates in Control Center are able to do that very easily. So we find that initially it looks like it's not that much value. Initially it feels like, oh, this is just saving me 5 minutes. This is just, kind of forcing me to be a little more disciplined than I probably would have been, but I would have been fine. But what we find is when people start to scale, when people actually create many projects, that they have, 50, 100 projects on something, it can get really messy really quick, and the users stop trusting the information if you don't have Control Center. So it's definitely something to evaluate on a case-by-case basis, because not everybody needs this powerful of a tool for what they're doing. But we find more often than not that if somebody is going to really create repeatable processes and have a project that is created, whether it be a project or other type of asset they're trying to have depth for, we find that it's worth it to get Control Center because of the discipline it forces, and the way that it makes an application wrapped around Smartsheet, instead of just being like, an online Excel feel where you're just kind of duplicating multiple sheets. You feel like it's an application that's controlling the process of automating notifications, creating the projects, and so forth. So definitely I'm happy to explore this with any customer asks, but overall, this is what we find. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.